Why did protesters target a synagogue in New York City this past week? My name is Zipporah. I'm with Angel, bringing you the latest in political news. Remember to subscribe so that you get notifications when we upload. November 4th was a really important election all across this country, but I think especially for New Yorkers. New York City had a really important race, electing the new mayor, very heated race between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani. Now, for months, polls had Andrew Cuomo way behind. Polls have been saying for months that Zohran was going to win this race, and he did win by a sizable margin. I think that there's been a lot of anxiety around uh, a Mamdani administration, particularly amongst Jewish New Yorkers. I think there's just been a lot of anxiety about whether he will protect all New Yorkers, strongly condemn anti-Semitism wherever it arises, especially when it pops up in situations where he might be sympathetic to the other side. I know that he has very strong views about the state of Israel. He has very strong views about the war in Gaza. He, as assembly member, I believe it was twice he voted against a resolution to recognize the Holocaust. And so he has sort of this history, it sounds like, that has been kind of steeped in anti-Semitism, and the Jewish New Yorkers, rightly so, have anxiety around that. And I think that there was some hope in the days following the election. There were a few instances of some anti-Semitic vandalism. He strongly condemned that. But the real test was last week. The real test was last week. There was a protest in a synagogue, and it was as he could have and should have. And so let's read about what happened. A crowd chanted death threats outside a New York City synagogue. Mamdani found fault with both sides. Mayor-elect has previously denounced obvious instances of anti-Semitism, but this was his first real test, a case of anti-Semitism motivated by anti-Zionism, and he didn't exactly condemn it. The day after his election to be the next mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani condemned the swastika that had been graffitied onto a Jewish day school in Brooklyn. To the many Jews who had expressed concern about the mayor-elect, a longtime outspoken anti-Israel activist, this was a heartening sign. An immediate, clear condemnation of Jew hatred in the city with the largest Jewish population in the world. It was also somewhat obvious. In terms of the hierarchy of fighting anti-Semitism, condemning a swastika on a school is literally the lowest of bars. The same could be said of when Mamdani condemned another instance of clearly anti-Semitic graffiti this week in Brooklyn. This time, it said Jews, though some of his supporters still gave him flack for those posts. Mamdani's first real test when it comes to anti-Semitism actually came Wednesday night, when a crowd gathered outside Park East Synagogue, an Orthodox congregation on Manhattan's Upper East Side, and chanted, "From New York to Gaza, globalize the Intifada," and "Resistance, you make us proud, take another settler out." And individual protesters shouted anti-Semitic epithets. The occasion for the protest was an open house organized by Nefesh B'Nefesh, the group that facilitates North American Jewish Aliyah, or immigration, to Israel. No one seriously thought Mamdani would be okay with the swastika. The question was always how he would respond to anti-Semitism motivated by anti-Zionism, an ideology he supports. On Thursday, we found out the answer. He didn't really condemn the protest, and he blamed both sides. As opposed to the other instances of anti-Semitism in recent weeks, Mamdani, as of this writing, had posted nothing about this on Twitter. His office did, upon request, send a statement to a few outlets, including the Times of Israel. The mayor-elect has discouraged the language used at last night's protest and will continue to do so, Mamdani spokesperson Dora Peck said Thursday. He believes every New Yorker should be free to enter a house of worship without intimidation, and that these sacred spaces should not be used to promote activities in violation of international law. My question would be, what activities were promoted that were in any kind of violation of any law, much less international law? What was the violation? The statement does not mention Jews. It does not mention anti-Semitism. It does not refer at all to the protesters who screamed anti-Semitic invective, only saying Mamdani has discouraged the language used. Which language exactly? It doesn't say. It doesn't say. And I think that we're getting a clearer understanding of what he is going to consider anti-Semitism, what he does not consider anti-Semitism, and what we can expect from him going forward. And continue reading. That's a far cry from his reaction to the anti-Semitic street graffiti earlier this week, upon which he posted another horrific act of anti-Semitism on our streets. We cannot stand for this. Then there's the last line of the statement, declaring that these sacred spaces should not be used to promote activities in violation of international law. What exactly was the violation of international law here? That's the question I just asked. Defenders of the protest, some of them Jewish, are claiming that the demonstration wasn't against Jews, it was against the promotion of Israeli settlements, where Nefesh B'Nefesh does facilitate some aliyah. Most of the world considers West Bank settlements a violation of international law. But Nefesh B'Nefesh's blurb about the open house didn't mention the West Bank. The protesters, in any case, did not distinguish between the West Bank and Israel, and neither, it seems, did Mamdani. His statement did not attempt to explain to his future Jewish constituents or others why an Aliyah open house constitutes a promotion of activities in violation of international law. But the statement does suggest that he feels there's fault on both sides. The open house at a synagogue and the protesters shouting anti-Semitic insults outside of it. It is perfectly legal in the United States, of course, to protest Israel and, like Mamdani, consider its nature as a Jewish state illegitimate. It's also true that a growing number of American Jews are critical of Israel, and that a third of New York Jews voted for Mamdani. But beyond the explicitly anti-Semitic statements on Wednesday night, it's important to note that, according to surveys taken both before and after October 7, 2023, most United States Jews felt attached to Israel. They most said they wanted the United States to support Israel. In 2020, at least, more than 80% of American Jews said caring about Israel was important to their Jewish identity. Perhaps, ironically, Nefesh B'Nefesh could hardly have wished for a better advertisement than the protest. It's unlikely that masses of New York Jews are going to pick up and move to Israel, but a protest calling for outside of a shul will only increase the chances. Indeed, a Nefesh B'Nefesh staffer told the Times of Israel that Wednesday's event more serious discussion of Aliyah as an option than previously. Unlike Mamdani, New York City's outgoing mayor, Eric Adams, and the state's Democratic governor clearly condemned the protest. No New Yorker should be intimidated or harassed at their house of worship, Governor Kathy Hochul posted. What happened last night at Park East Synagogue was shameful and a blatant attack on the Jewish community. This isn't an isolated event. Protests like this one have happened over and over across New York, whether in heavily Jewish neighborhoods, at an exhibit about the Nova Music Festival massacre, or beyond, though some of the chants explicitly calling for death were new. Public officials, even ones hardly sympathetic to Israel, have condemned those previous incidents. Thursday's statement is an indication that, as mayor, Mamdani's response will likely be different. So there you have it. This was an organized protest at a house of worship. These are buildings that are sacred and are protected. In America, we have the freedom to practice our religion in whatever way that we choose. And Mamdani, it was incumbent upon him to condemn what happened that night in the strongest possible terms. Death threats were chanted outside the synagogue, and he didn't find it important enough to condemn the highest possible terms. I think that this gives us a picture going forward of what we can expect from a Mamdani administration in terms of how high they're going to toe the line on condemning anti-Semitism, saying that it has no place here. I think we have a clear understanding of what Zohran Mamdani considers anti-Semitism and what he does not consider anti-Semitism. And I think that we can safely say that he was definitely going to use his position as mayor to advance his own ideology, his deeply held views about the state of Israel. Israel is a sovereign nation, and people immigrate there all the time. It's not a violation of the law to immigrate to Israel. And to say that it does is very problematic. We're going to keep an eye on this story. Remember to subscribe so that you always get notifications when we upload. And we'll see you back here soon.